James Spader's character in Sex Lies takes pleasure in watching women talk about their sex lives, but he only, let's say, does anything about it after the fact. But the pleasure you get from sipping spark plug coffee while you're drinking spark plug coffee is very attached.
That's a great connection between
Sometimes
the movie and the product.
Spurious connections. And that's because Sparkplug has Canada's freshest, fairly traded, premium Arabica beans. They've got a big old variety of blends and roasts. Seasonal blends even rotate, so you can be sure to drink something that fits the time of year. And if you need your Java to be decaf or half calf, Sparkplug can offer those types of beans. If you're a Canadian or an American, you will get your orders sent within a week. And we who live north of the 49th parallel will get free shipping. Baton Rouge is a long way away from Canada, but even Graham, Anne, John, and Cynthia can order what they want. And how about this suggestion? Be a member of Sparkplug's Autopilot Coffee Club. Membership will nab you deals and, appropriately, perks. Plus, you'll save money on every order. You can even customize to get your orders when it suits your drinking needs. So that's solid proof that this isn't a rinky-dink Coffee of the Month club. Go to sparkplug.coffee. You will save 20% off your next order by using our HYES promo code. And you can enjoy that privilege whether you're a long-time customer or a first-time customer. So sparkplug.coffee/HYES. Okay, videotape aficionados, our full review of Steven Soderbergh's debut film is seconds away. Let's get to it. Bev?
And action! Have you ever seen
Sex, Lies, and Videotape? Hiya, film buddies, and thank you for checking out the 566th podcast on this channel we call Have You Ever Seen? We scamper back a ways to view classic films, and we see how they look to us now. And we spoil. I'm the man who couldn't grow a fabulous mullet the way James Spader did 35 years ago, but I couldn't do it at any point, really, not just 35 years ago. But I would enjoy hearing Laura San Giacomo talk about her sex life. Ryan Ellis. And here's a lady who would never discover another woman's earring under our bed because she doesn't do the vacuuming. I do. That's my job. And she's my wife, Bev.
That's me. I better never sleep with a man who wears earrings.
Tell me about it if you do. I'll be quite fascinated to hear. Okay, the coming attractions trivia question for Sex Lies and Videotape. James Spader was widely acclaimed for his performance in Sex Lies, which is, of course, a movie about erotic subject matter. We've only covered Spader once before on this channel. I was surprised to see that, only once before. The subject in that film was also about controversial sex. What was that movie?
That was Secretary.
We covered that a couple years ago. He also withholds from getting traditional sexual pleasure in that one for a long time, like he does in this. You know, he hasn't made a movie since 2015.
Really?
And that was only a voice, Age of Ultron. He's the voice of Ultron. Because he's been doing the Blacklist all this time. I think maybe at his age, I've never heard this, but maybe the logic is, I love the show, I work hard on that, I don't need to make movies too. Although most people do, even if they work on a show for 5, 10, 20 years.
It's not like he's an A-lister who can pick his own projects.
He's
exactly
A-list,
either.
but...
Okay, but you might reach a point in your career where you're like, Blacklist is a very successful show, it's probably making him tons of money, but best of all, he never has to leave the city he's working in. He doesn't have to go on location for months at a time, do these exhausting long days. TV, as I understand, is just altogether a much easier lifestyle to maintain than making feature films.
And he's 64 in a couple weeks, so he's not a young man.
Retirement age.
Yep. All right, Lusty Fibbin was released by Miramax 35 years ago on September 22nd, 1989. This is one of the flicks that helped put Harvey and Bob Weinstein's company on the map. And then Harvey raped it. He raped the movie. Or jerked off in a plant.
You committed to this joke, babe.
Raped it. That's bad taste, I guess. Well, I'm known for that sometimes. The budget wasn't very big, but it went on to make over $25 million worldwide. But Bev, people might not have seen Steven Soderbergh's debut in quite a while. Let them know what this thing is about and give them the skinny on Sex Lies and, very dated, antiquated thing, Videotape.
Peter Gallagher and Andie MacDowell are John and Anne, a seemingly perfect young couple living in Baton Rouge, until John's old friend Graham, played by James Spader, comes to town and disrupts their delicate balance by simply being authentic and honest and curious, and, to be honest, kind of strange. Anne is first interested by Graham, then repelled, then attracted. She comes to confront all the ways her life is a lie. Decades of following the rules have gotten her a rotten deal, and Graham's friendship, along with the discovery that her husband is sleeping with her sister, give her the push to blow it all up and start over.
Or, in a nutshell, Interview with the Damn Liar. Interview with the Vampire.
Oh, I get it. But nobody lies in the interviews.
He says that he's a compulsive liar at the end.
But he doesn't lie in this movie.
But he says he's a liar.
That's part of his magic trick. Well, he was a liar. The true liar in this film, other than people who lie to themselves, but the real liar is John.
That was what I was going to say at the end of this, is that you've got 4 liars. Maybe not so much Anne. She's lying to herself about what she wants, I guess, for a long time. Before the movie even started. Years before, I guess. Decades, maybe. Then you got the sister and the husband fucking around. That's bad. You're cheating on your wife, but with her sister, and then the sister doing that, and her sister has contempt for her. We see in the first scene that Laura has. Laura San Giacomo? Giacomo. Let's say San Giacomo. See if I get that right the rest of the episode. And then obviously Graham says, I'm a compulsive liar.
But that's more the explanation for why he practices radical honesty. Because he doesn't lie in this movie.
Do you think he's being honest all the time in this movie? I wonder if he actually was gotten to by Anne when he seems to lose his composure about Elizabeth. Okay, I can buy that triggers him. And I don't know why he would do this, but it made me think in that scene, is he just, in a way, performing?
When do you think he's lying? What do you think he's lying
I'm
about?
speculating that maybe through that scene where he interviews Anne.
Okay, when he interviews Anne is when everything is falling apart. That's like the climax of the film, and everybody's been broken down by each other, by what's happening in their lives. Is Graham lying? If he's lying to himself. I think he lies to himself about the notion that he can protect other people from his problems. She even says to him, your problems broke up our marriage. Your problems bleed over to other people's lives. You can't actually keep this stuff to yourself. So that's the lie he tells himself, that if he keeps moving, if he doesn't own anything, if he just lives this really unusual life, then he can't hurt anybody. That's the lie that he tells.
It's still a good nutshell. Okay, fine. When he interviews Cynthia, she's a liar. Interview with the damn liar.
Okay.
All right, the numbers on Sex, Lies, and Videotape, your last movie in the month of Bev. Rotten Tomatoes numbers are great. Well, at least the critical numbers are. 96% of critics like this movie. 8 out of 10 is the average. There are 54 reviews on the site. And our foster dog, appropriately for this movie, is licking the hell out of herself.
She really is making a meal out of her feet right now. And so if you hear something that sounds sexy,
the last couple minutes I've heard it.
It's a dog licking her feet.
Yeah. But only 79% of audiences like this movie. Traffic and Out of Sight, we've covered both of those, are way up there. But those are the best reviews of Soderbergh's career, the 96% for this as a director. He almost always, by the way, has considerably better ratings from critics than audiences. Most people don't refer to the audience numbers on Rotten Tomatoes. I always do. I just like the comparison. Something like Rocky, for example, and I think Forrest Gump also, the audience numbers were way down compared to the critical numbers. And for Soderbergh, it's not quite as drastic as those movies were, at least Rocky was. But you'll see 94, 96 in this case, 91, 88. And then the audience number is more like 75, 72, 67.
This is the kind of movie where I can see a lot of people we know watching it.
Not liking it?
And as the credits roll, just saying, I don't get it. Movie critics get it. I don't think anybody who calls himself a movie critic isn't going to understand what the film language is and what he's trying to do and the rules that he's breaking.
What I'm saying, though, is that this is a constant thing with him over and over again.
I'm surprised because look at, like, the Ocean's movies. This man knows how to make a crowd pleaser. Mm-hmm. You can't tell me critics like Logan Lucky better than audiences.
Well, I didn't look through all the way. I'm just saying that when I looked through he's made so many movies. And, of course, when you look at Rotten Tomatoes, you see the producer credits, and he's got a lot of those. So I was just trying to look for director credits. But over and over in the 90 range, when it said 90-something, it was more like 70-something for the audiences. This was 46th at the 1989 U.S. box office. Driving Miss Daisy was number 8. That's the Best Picture winner. Parenthood was number 9, one of my favorites from that year. And When Harry Met Sally, which was your favorite from that year, was 11th. We've covered all 3 of those in the past. Sex Lies was put in the National Film Registry by Congress, I guess. I don't really know who actually does that, but it's the Congressional Library.
Yeah.
Anyway, in 2006, along with 5 other films we've previously covered. Fargo, which we again just watched, but I think we've seen at least twice since we covered it for the podcast. Still laughed our asses off. Another Andie MacDowell movie, Groundhog Day. Halloween, Notorious, and Rocky. And all of those have been covered on this channel at one time or another. Halloween was only a few months ago, which I did on my own back in October. This was nominated for an Oscar, Soderbergh's original screenplay. Dead Poets Society won. I like that movie, but this is probably a better script. I think also Spike Lee he was nominated for the screenplay. That was the best screenplay, actually, of those three. And probably
Do the Right Thing?
For Do the Right Thing. This won the Palme d'Or over Do the Right Thing and a lot of other movies, but that's the one that stood out to me. That was controversial, though. I remember in Ebert's review talking about how at the press conference, Spike Lee was fending off, oh my God, you're going to make all the black people go crazy with your movie. That was what came away from that festival. Maybe that's why it didn't win. Maybe they didn't like the movie enough. They should have, though. That movie has aged, unfortunately, extremely well. And I like Sex, Lies, and Dead Poet Society and many others, but Do the Right Thing is the best of all those. Anyway, this won the Palme d'Or for the young Soderbergh. It was 25 or something at the festival in 89. He was the youngest winner, at least at that point, to ever win it, because, of course, it always goes to the director. He also won I think I said this right, Fipresci Prize. It's all capitals, F-I-P-R-E-S-C-I. It stands for something, obviously. And James Spader won Best Actor. And something must have changed because I don't think you can ever win multiple prizes at the festival anymore for a movie. So if everyone thinks this is the best movie and that's also the best performance and the best direction, unlike the Oscars, they split it up like that. Deliberately, they have to, I think, now. Huh. That must have changed, though, because this won 3 awards. And it was nominated for 2 AFI lists, the big ones, the 1998 and 2007 AFI Top 100, so the main lists. I know you love it. You picked it for this month. Your 4th time picking a movie this month. What are your thoughts on Sex Lies?
I just think this movie's wonderful. It proves that a simple story can be so deeply compelling and spellbinding even. The script is marvelous. The performances are so wonderful. And even though I know people who would not get it, I still feel like I would recommend this to just about anyone. I would particularly recommend this to anybody who is an aspiring filmmaker because the success of this film changed the way indies get funded and indies get made and indies get distributed. It really was the vanguard of what people agree the 90s was like pretty game-changing for film in general, but particularly independent studios, film festivals like Sundance, for being a place to find hit films. But most of all, I would recommend it to any aspiring filmmakers because the screenplay is damn near perfect.
It's also very cinematic. Soderbergh talks about how he has a predatory camera, and it also moves a lot. He's got it on tracks quite a bit.
He was afraid people would get bored.
Because it's mostly, as we just said, we just 25 minutes ago stopped watching Killers of the Flower Moon, which we liked more than we thought we would. It's definitely a big movie, and Marty would be mad we didn't see it on the big screen, but really, like almost every movie that's ever been made it is about people talking in rooms, which is specifically what this is. But to make it be not, well, I don't think it would have been boring, but to make it not just be shot, reverse, that kind of thing. His camera, especially in the dinner scene with the 3 of them, Anne, Graham, and John, comes all the way around. I think it's an unbroken take for a good long time, too. It starts, I think it's behind Graham or something. Anyway, it comes all the way around. Reservoir Dogs, Tarantino did that, too, in the diner scene in the beginning of that film. It does help give it more life. You've got no cuts, which if you notice as a viewer, you're thinking, okay, why aren't they cutting? People always cut in movies constantly. Even then, they cut way more often than he does.
Even if you don't notice, you would notice something was different about it. You feel the tension of waiting for something to happen.
And I think this is the movie where he says in the commentary, I'm not certain of this, but I think it's this one, where he said he wanted to do a scene with 2 people talking, and I think it's a scene when MacDowell and Spader are at the diner, and he talks about how he's impotent and doesn't have respect for therapy. So that scene, I think on the commentary he talks about how I want to do a scene one day where something like this is happening. They're having a conversation like this, but it's all entirely reaction shots. So when Spader's talking, you see MacDowell, and when she's talking, you see him. He didn't do that here, but I think that's where I heard him say that, and I wanted to see somebody ever do that. And they probably wouldn't. Maybe somebody's made that movie and 5 people saw it, but literally 5 people, they're friends.
But look how effective that choice is. It doesn't feel like a gimmick.
Well, he doesn't actually do it. I'm saying that he wanted to do that.
Okay, but he does use that technique a lot in that scene. Yes, you do see people talking, but the camera focuses a lot. I shouldn't say the camera. The editing focuses a lot on the reactions of one character listening to another character talk.
Yeah.
And how much intimacy does that create for the audience because then they become the listener.
Yeah.
Then they're listening.
They have to. They can't see the person talking.
But it's also seeing somebody's reaction. That's the connection right there. It's not what they're saying. It's how it's getting through to the person who's listening.
The movie starts off interestingly, too, because we see Graham driving. We don't really know it's Baton Rouge. It's only really, truly, clearly Baton Rouge at one point when you see graffiti behind Andie MacDowell walking. I think when she's meeting him. Anyway, you see graffiti behind her at one point. Otherwise, it doesn't matter where this is. But it is in Baton Rouge, because that's also where Soderbergh grew up.
It matters that it's the South. That helps explain Anne's character a lot.
Repressed, okay. And yeah, that's the contrast. She's in therapy while he's driving to town. And she's talking about how her sex life isn't great. And I wonder if she's just asexual. The movie would suggest she's not. She's got to be with the right guy. Because she and Spader...
We never see her have an orgasm.
We don't know that they actually have sex, but I think it's implied that they do. It is implied that they do.
I don't know. You have the characters of Cynthia and John who are having hot sex with zero connection. I don't even think they like each other. Actually, I'm pretty sure that Cynthia has pure contempt for John. She's doing it to get back at her sister. She's doing it just for fun or whatever, to feel something.
He's a good-looking guy.
The sex seems to be good. They're obviously having great sex, but there's no intimacy whatsoever. Yeah. And then you have the couple of Anne and Graham. We see intimacy. We don't see sex. It's totally possible for people to have a relationship that doesn't have sex, whether they're asexual or there's impotence. When it comes to impotence, there's more than one way to skin a cat. It's not like you can't have a sexual experience with somebody who can't get it up.
Of course, yeah.
She asks him to help her have an orgasm.
Which he could do without doing anything with himself. He could stay clothed.
Yeah, totally. And we don't know if that happens. I don't think it matters if that happens. I think that's kind of the point. I had to look this up because I knew the numbers were shocking. You say, is she asexual? I don't know about that because she clearly is interested in trying something. Plus, the concept of being asexual was not really a common knowledge thing in 1989. It feels like a fairly new thing that everybody knows about and talks about. So I looked it up. 30% of women say they've never had an orgasm during sex. And 10% say they've never had an orgasm at all. 10% of women. So with Anne, and I think with a lot of women, it's not that hard to suss out where this repression comes from. Some of these women are asexual, sure, but also our culture bombards us with the message that sexual men are virile and sexual women are vulgar. I know things are getting better, but probably not in the South even now. Christian nationalism is really running a number on women.
And isn't it interesting to say, because Anne in this film, Andie MacDowell, good performance. She's quite good in this movie. And Soderbergh didn't want her. He wanted Elizabeth Hartman, is that her name? He wanted somebody else, but she wasn't available. And I think he flat out did not want Andie MacDowell because she hadn't impressed him with her performance in Greystoke many years before. She was dubbed by Glenn Close, which was, I think, pretty well known.
She can't lose her accent. That's part of the problem.
So set this in the South.
Part of why she got dubbed in that movie, because she can't lose her accent. She said that she knew she could do this part because she grew up in the South.
This is one of the best things she's ever done.
Oh, hands down.
But she's so proper. And then Laura San Giacomo is fantastic in this. It is the best thing she's done. I've never seen Just Shoot Me. Maybe she's great in that show. I don't know. But even if she is, it's a TV show. So I'm going to take the movie over the TV show. Liked her in Pretty Woman quite a bit, which was the year after this. We covered that a couple years ago. I guess it's almost 4 years ago now. Holy shit, it has been 4 years. It was 1990. We covered it in 2020. But anyway, she's excellent in this movie. She may be the best thing in it, by the way. Laura is. But she is a vulgar person in general, forgetting that she's fucking around.
She's a free person. I don't think she's vulgar.
Okay, well, anyway, it fits
it's
the theme of what
vulgar
you're talking
that
about.
she's sleeping with her sister's husband. That's the wrong thing to do. But when it comes to her sexuality, I just see a woman who's free. Because it's not like she'll sleep with anybody. We see her at work. The guy at the bar is constantly hitting at her. She just blows him off. She has boundaries. She's not shy about it. When she wants something, she takes it. She's not embarrassed about it. That scandalizes Anne. She tells Anne about everything she did with Graham.
She got naked.
That she took her clothes off, that she masturbated. And Anne's like, how could you? I mean, this is before the internet. And she was still like, what if people get their hands on these videos? The consequences could be so great. And I gotta tell you, anybody who's young and listening to this, in 1989, the chances of a video like that going viral, big scare quotes, like nobody's going to see it. Now the internet makes it possible for somebody to send this to your boss, your mom, truly ruin your life with something. At worst, something like this might be embarrassing for her, but it's so unlikely to happen under these circumstances.
Plus, she trusts that he won't actually release this to anybody. He tells her he's not going to show anybody else, never mind release it to the public. And I don't think he ever, well, he didn't, clearly, do any of those things. In fact, he breaks the tapes and throws the camera at the end.
He destroys them because his promise was broken as soon as John breaks in, locks him out, and starts watching the tape. It's more to it than that he knows deep down that what he's doing is a stopgap for intimacy.
Well, the real reason is because John comes out of the house after watching the long tape. We see some of the tape, and then we see the actual scene, which is good, because it would have been terrible to look at that awful image on a videotape with the movie. You just see the beginning of it anyway. But Spader and MacDowell have that scene play out for a while. John watches all of that. The camera cuts out before they actually have sex, if they do. He comes out and says, I fucked Elizabeth. She could keep a secret, and she was good in bed. That's another reason, if not the main reason, why Graham says, well, fuck this whole thing, because that's his trigger point, is Elizabeth. And he's doing this in some ways because of her. Well, if he can't even have respect for the memory of her, and he probably won her back, and now I guess he doesn't, finding out that she cheated on him back in college with his roommate, and at the time a friend, not anymore a friend. So there's a lot of reasons he destroys those tapes and the camera, but that might be the single biggest one. You know what? Sell that camera. Don't just break it.
Well, he doesn't need money. We know that. So John is a liar. Do you think he's telling the truth there? Do you think he actually slept with Elizabeth?
Maybe not.
I'm not actually convinced that Graham cares that much. Graham is a person who has come very far away from the person he was when he was in love with Elizabeth. And it's something that John brings up, and you can see that Graham is sensitive about it. When he breaks those tapes, I think it's more about how his experience with Anne changed him and woke him up to the fact that this little status quo situation that he has going on, that he thinks is so smart and he's staying ahead of his demons, is not actually working.
Yeah, but why do it with violence? He destroys these things, including the camera. He's mad when he's doing that. We don't see his face, we just see his actions.
What's the alternative? If he decides this is actually bad for me and it's bad for these women because I'm risking them, or it was a mistake in the first place,
or junk them, but why destroy the camera?
To never do it again, the same way an alcoholic might pour their booze down the sink.
Okay. You're right, though. John could be lying about that. It's possible. I just took him to be telling the truth there because I could see that he would have fucked around with his roommate's girlfriend, and we don't know Elizabeth at all, so we can't judge her.
So I kind of want to hear your opinion on the character of John, because I think if there's a weakness in this film, and I'm not sure that I even agree with myself here, it would be the two-dimensional nature of the character of John. John represents plenty of actual men, and he certainly represents a system that suits men like John, but he's the one character that the screenplay seems to treat with zero empathy. He's just selfish and destructive and oblivious, and his comeuppance is satisfying, sure, but it's the cheapest thrill in the film that's otherwise complex and thought-provoking. There's a story worth exploring about how John, by taking full advantage of all the ways that the world is built to cater to him, has sold himself short too. He is the person in the film who doesn't change, who never gets to break through and experience real empathy or intimacy. But what could it mean to him to see his old friend reject everything that he embraced and live this authentic life where at the very least he's comfortable in his own skin, which I don't think John really is, and that he's also so compelling to the two women that John is involved with, yeah. Anne and Cynthia. You know, they both ultimately turn towards Graham. You think that would make him do some soul searching, but the movie isn't interested in that. So what do you think? Does it sell him short, or is it important to have a character who doesn't change in this film? Who represents very much the status quo. He's the guy who is going to win in the end. What do you think is going to happen to him? Yeah, he's having a rough week. He lost a client. He's wearing a suit from the back of his closet because he doesn't have his wife to do his laundry anymore.
It sounds like he's about to get fired.
He might get fired, but you know what? He's going to be fine.
I have a note about that. He's going to land on his feet.
He's going to be fine. And in 2 years, he's going to have a brand new wife who's going to be 10 years younger than Anne. And he'll start all over. And maybe this time he'll know to be more careful about his affairs or whatever it is.
Well, we agree on that. Is he two-dimensional? Yeah, he is. Peter Gallagher's pretty good in this, though. Mm-hmm. Maybe that was intentional by Soderbergh because the sisters' relationship is quite complex, including the ending. So Anne finds out that not only did my husband cheat, but then my sister cheated with him. And not just once, not some drunken thing. They fucked around a lot.
And as difficult as their relationship is, they talk on the phone all the time.
Yes, with a lot of vitriol, but still, they do talk.
Yeah, but there's still very much a relationship. There's something that they're losing here. And obviously, Cynthia does love Anne.
Anne goes to her at the end, bringing a plant, and it's not so vitriolic at all. But Anne obviously forgave her. I don't know exactly why. I could see why someone would say, it's almost worse that you cheated than he cheated. Because my sister, you, cheated with my husband. If you fucked around with anybody else, including she's jealous, obviously, that Cynthia was with. She doesn't fuck Graham, does she? She just masturbates in front of him and has this experience with him as well. But still, that's something that Anne realizes that, I guess, anyway, that she wants to do herself. But as far as John goes, yeah, I guess he is two-dimensional, but that's maybe a good thing in some ways in a movie like this, to have somebody who's not three-dimensional. It's not like he's the worst person we could ever see. He's just the worst in this movie. But then the Cynthia thing, I think Laura's great. But her character, when we first meet her, they've been fucking around. We know the movie, but when you first see the movie, you don't realize that it's husband and sister.
They make it pretty clear pretty quick.
No,
but in that first scene, at the end of that scene, she's
no, but
like,
before
I would get
the end
on,
of this, I'm talking about when they're fucking. You don't know
okay.
Who they are, but you find out before the scene's over, yes. But what you don't usually see in a movie like this is that she has contempt for her. She's doing this almost on purpose. Maybe she's not really that turned on by John at all. She could be, but maybe it's more a matter of, I want to fuck over Anne specifically. That's not the most common thing in a movie like this, which gives this a lot more depth. Also does make me wonder why Anne would forgive her, but then she doesn't know that Cynthia feels that way, I guess. We know that, but maybe she didn't ever find that out.
Well, Anne is little is perfect, right? She is the girl that got good grades, that always followed the rules.
For the record, we said this during the movie, Andie MacDowell's always been very pretty. But Laura in this movie especially, even Pretty Woman and the other things she did, but in this movie, man, she's sexy and hot. And she's the better looking one of the two, I think.
Yeah, but I can see how growing up, Anne was the pretty one, right?
Okay.
And then Cynthia is always the one that comes second to her, the one that doesn't measure up, the one that all her life people were telling her to be more like her sister. And Anne, she's not a happy woman. All of her right choices have not worked out for her, and her reaction to this is kind of similar to the character of Ebba in Force Majeure, which we covered a couple weeks ago, where her response to her own unhappiness is to lash out at people who break the rules. She is a prude, she is judgy, she gives Cynthia a hard time about her choices, so she's piling on with everybody else that always told Cynthia that she wasn't good enough, she wasn't measuring up. So she's not just the little Miss Perfect that she can't measure up to. She's also part of the forces that are telling Cynthia that she's doing it all wrong.
Yeah.
Part of that animosity comes from that, but I think Anne comes to realize she's directing her animosity in the wrong direction. And that she probably comes to realize by the end of the film that Cynthia has a lot of things right. That she has the right idea about certain things. Anne actually kind of reminds me of the character of Carol in Safe, the Todd Haynes film Safe, starring Julianne Moore. Beautiful film, and an indie film that could never have been made, I don't think, if Sex, Lies, and Videotape hadn't come out about 6 years before.
And Soderbergh did produce some of Haynes' movies in the 2000s.
Oh, wow, there you go. Here you have another character who's this nearly perfect yet completely repressed housewife. And in Carol's case, it leads to this madness, I guess, for lack of a better word. I don't know exactly how to describe what happens to her. It's a completely different outcome from Anne's, and actually a much more tragic outcome, I'd say. Anne gets a nicer treatment, and she's freed by this enlightenment. That starts with sexual liberation.
Yeah. We don't know that Anne and Graham are going to be together now, but it seems like they are at the very end. I guess the movie's saying they are, but it's not 100% clear. Is she living with him, or is she just visiting him?
At any rate, she sits down, he starts stroking her arm. They behave like couples. Also, interesting note, she's wearing the exact same outfit in that very last shot, which is not the outfit she wears to the bar when she visits Cynthia. But they close the movie with this shot of her in this very same dress that she's wearing in the psychiatrist's office at the beginning of the film.
Right. And, of course, the movie starts with an interview with a psychiatrist, and then so much of this is about Graham interviewing, I guess, 3 women mostly, the one we see on the tape. JJL, Jennifer Jason Leigh, could have played Cynthia, but I guess she never returned the calls or just somewhat blew them off because, of course, who the hell is Steven Soderbergh? And even Miramax, they had done things. Harvey was actually, I think, a concert promoter, before, and maybe Bob too, before they really got truly into movies. And Harvey, I think, had directed something at this point as well. So maybe JJL was big leaguing them a little bit, but also she was at least going to be the one on the tape. Instead, that was the person who worked on the movie that played that character. So she gets interviewed by him and, of course, the 2 sisters. That's all we ever see, but he's got a lot of tapes. So the whole movie's about interviewing. The very beginning is with the psychiatrist, and then so much of the movie with Graham is.
So much of the movie is people asking intimate questions and forcing people to answer it. It starts with the shrink asking Andie MacDowell, do you masturbate? Or isn't he asking her some questions?
I think so. That's why I thought maybe she's asexual, and that's why I made that note, because she doesn't even do that at all, which I think almost everybody does at some point, don't they? Even if you don't do it often.
10% of women don't.
Maybe just, have you ever? Everybody.
Well, Anne admits that she tried it once, but she felt silly. She thought her dead grandfather was watching her, and she just couldn't go through with it. Even judgment from heaven. Somebody's looking down on her. And
I think most people would be lying, though, if they said they didn't do it.
I wonder if that 10% is really loaded by people who live in more repressive cultures.
And what's the safest sex act you can ever do?
Well, tell that to a minister. They're not going to tell
That's why it's
They're
stupid
going to say
and
that it's going to send you straight to hell.
And look at the state this movie's set in. The one with parishes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Louisiana definitely has religious bent to it.
Even though they're also the party state, at least the one part of French Quarter. Not Baton Rouge, but the French Quarter in New Orleans.
And don't we see Anne wearing a cross?
A huge.
Big cross through a lot of this film. So
I think a lot of rappers would be jealous of that.
They don't show her going to church. They don't show her praying or anything like that. But we know that religion obviously has a heavy influence on her as well.
As far as the sex scenes go, Cynthia, I guess, goes to their house because she wanted to do it. That's why the earrings there, I guess. She wanted to do it in Anne's bed.
He contrives to have Anne go out with Graham so that he can have the house to himself. Yeah.
And there's the potted plant on his dick. I always remember that scene.
Yeah.
It's the kind of scene I remembered years ago and didn't remember the movie. Then I saw this movie after I bought it, I guess, and thought, oh, that's right, that's this movie. Then, at one point, I think it's actually the same scene, she leaves in a huff. We don't know why. What happened that was so bad? But the most memorable thing with their sex scenes, I guess maybe the first one's pretty memorable too, because we don't know at the very beginning who these two are, and they find out, oh my God. But when they have that intense sex after she's already been, Cynthia, with Graham, wasn't with Graham, but had spent the time with him and did all the things we just talked about, including masturbating. They have an intense sex scene, apparently. And at the end, you can go now.
That's what I say. When they have no intimacy, they don't even like each other.
Even when she's just had an incredible orgasm, they're both covered in sweat, she still wants him to leave immediately, which she didn't do the other times. They actually had conversations. Now it's, we just finished. That was fucking awesome, but get the hell out of here. It's not that sexy a movie, actually. We don't ever see nudity. But Graham is nude while he's watching a video of one of the women. Well, I guess it's that one of that girl. It's not Elizabeth, I don't think, right?
She describes masturbating on a plane.
Who is this again? It's Alexandra Root plays Girl on Tape. There's only the four mains. The therapist is Ron Votter. Stephen Brill is the barfly. And then three other people that have any credit on this whatsoever. The landlord that rents out the place to Graham and John's colleague who's sitting in his office. You hear, it's not in here, but you hear the woman's voice on the intercom calling John to go see the boss because he's probably going to get turfed. And there are people in the diner as well, Spader and MacDowell. When they're in the diner, there's people around them. No credits for that here. So it's what, maybe 8, 9, 10 people credited in the whole film, and only 4 that really count. Well, I guess the therapist as well.
I think I read that they did convert this to a play once upon a time.
Oh, you could see that easily being...
It's so easy, yeah. It would play so well on stage.
But what about Graham watching the video? Yeah, he's got the blanket around him, but he's clearly... We don't actually realize he's completely naked when we first see him watching it. You can tell he's got no shirt on, but he gets up, goes into the room. You don't see his Johnson, but you can tell he's got no clothes on. He just gets into the bedroom enough, doesn't close the door, when I think Anne comes over and says it's open and gets clothes on pretty quickly.
I think that's when Cynthia comes over.
Okay, well anyway, she doesn't see that he was naked a few minutes ago watching this tape.
There's an 80s touch. Just go into someone's house unannounced. Well, he doesn't have a phone. Okay, I guess I'll just march on over there and introduce myself, which is what she does.
So he's making his own pornography, though, if that's
that's
what...
literally what he's doing. I think the movie ages beautifully, but people's attitudes towards something like this in 1989 were so different.
Okay, well, here's the question. Would you do this? And would you do this if you thought or even knew that the man recording you was going to jerk off to it later, with a proviso that it's a guy who looks like James Spader doing this?
Okay, if it was a man that I was attracted to and I trusted, if there was some way to feel safe that there's no way anybody else could see the video, and if I was single, of course, yeah, why not? I can see the appeal of somebody being this curious about them because he conveys so much with that unflinching glare. This movie would be nothing without James Spader. His performance makes the film. I can't picture anybody else in the part. Him and his intense stare, they take something that's smart and interesting and makes it explosive. He's sexy, he's very non-judgmental, but maybe the most radical thing about him is that he's asking questions that suggest genuine curiosity about the inner lives of these women.
Yeah.
And he's listening to the answers. What's laid bare in his interviews isn't porny. It isn't like, what are you wearing? Touch this, do that.
True.
You watch porn that is voyeuristic porn, and it's always a man's voice telling a woman what to do, and she's just trying to please him, please him, please him. That is not what you see in these videos at all. These women have agency. They can stop any time. In every video that we see, the women are almost begging to be there to take part in this. They are very interested and they feel very sexy and emboldened. This is exciting for them.
I feel like Cynthia is probably one of the rare ones that actually didn't like getting naked or jerking off for
and
him.
maybe she wanted to do it.
Yeah.
That curiosity that he expresses to them, it feels radical now in 2024, and it was certainly radical in the 80s. I think actually maybe even more radical now because porn has kind of warped the minds of entire generations.
Especially the young kids,
At this point, it would certainly be a radical idea to someone like John, who doesn't seem concerned at all that his wife has never experienced an orgasm. There's a name for it. Have you ever heard of the orgasm gap?
Or the indifference is what I was going to say is what the name for it is.
Oh, the total indifference, but because...
He's a bastard, as she says, so that fits.
Yeah, so many women can't have orgasms during sex, and almost no men report not being able to have an orgasm during sex. Like most men, it's not sex to them unless it ends with an orgasm. Researchers are like, there's obviously a gap. Men are having way more orgasms during sex than women. Why is that? That truly is a cultural thing that comes from the patriarchy. To let me pull out my hardcore feminist card here. You've heard these rants plenty of times. But it is unfair. And part of it is because there's all these men like John who grew up feeling entitled, watching porn, whatever it takes, to just feel like the world is your oyster, to be concerned whether or not your wife is getting off.
Well, here's something, though. Is it possible she pretended she was getting off?
Do you think that she fakes an orgasm?
Well, women apparently do a lot.
I don't think Anne fakes orgasms. Again, I think of the movie Safe. A great sex scene with her husband. Yep. I mean, it's not great because she is not remotely pretending. She's staring at the ceiling, kind of dead-eyed, there but not there, and he's having this really not obligatory, but whatever, they're having missionary sex. He finishes. She's like, okay, that's great. You know this is what their sex is like all the time. He just doesn't care if she's enjoying it or not. This is not that unusual.
Well, it's also key in that scene especially that we see her face and he doesn't. A lot of movies do that. It's a smart thing, actually. One of the most famous sex scenes of all time is when Jane Fonda won the Oscar for Clute. She's riding a guy, I think is what it is, and she's really selling how much she's getting off on this. She's a call girl, so she's obviously just paid to do it. But she's selling that she's into it and quickly glances at her watch. And in that second, Jane Fonda almost looks like she's just waiting for a bus. What time is it? Okay, back to making all the great noises.
And speaking of Jane Fonda, one of the most memorable things about the movie Coming Home is her sex scene with Jon Voight. They can't even have sex.
No. But he gets her off.
Goes down on her, and she has an orgasm. The movie really shows the orgasm. And she confesses to him afterwards, that never happened to me with her husband. Her husband and her had, from what I can tell, a perfectly healthy sex life, but she never once had an orgasm with him. Yeah. And I will add that when John watches the entire tape, and he sees her talk about her dissatisfaction with her sex life and how detached she feels from it and from him, what's his takeaway? Just to be jealous that she has a connection with Grant.
Yeah, that's what their real problem is.
He doesn't feel like he's inadequate. He doesn't feel like he let his wife down. He's not disappointed in himself whatsoever. Yeah. He's just wants to punish Grant for taking his wife.
He almost hit her when he found out that she went over to make a tape. MacDowell plays that really well. Maybe Gallagher really did scare her. I didn't read anything about that. But he does hit Graham, locks him outside, watches the tape. And yeah, that would have gone on for a little while. And we see what's supposed to be the entire interview on camera. Well, again, we see the actual scene rather than just that terrible-looking video we would have watched.
It's well played. It's well edited.
By the way, you talked about intimacy. One of the things that's really key here is that she uses his hand to touch herself, fully clothed, and does touch her boobs a little bit, I believe, but it's not really about, oh my God, cup my tit. It's more about just touching her neck, and it leads down that way. She caresses him. She lays him down on the couch. She's taking care of him more than he's taking care of her, although presumably he helped her have an orgasm, at least, even if they didn't have sex.
See, you're making all these presumptions. I ask, is it important whether they had orgasms or not?
Well, that's the thing, too. A lot of guys out there, certainly back in 89 and probably even now, would be more bothered that they had any kind of sex, whether it was good or bad. I'd be more bothered if I found out that you, way more bothered, had intimate connections the way that we see the two of them, Anne and Graham, are going on with your, never mind the body parts connecting that way. Never mind, dick, pussy, all that stuff. The mental connection that they have. That should be a far bigger problem for any guy. And yet I think even now, although this is probably better, a lot of guys would not be as bothered by that if they found out that she sucked his dick or they had sex or whatever ended up happening physically.
Well, John sees Anne as a possession, not really as a person. So he doesn't want to share his possession with anybody else. That's what makes him feel threatened. You see me as a person. So my physical body, if I was sharing that with someone else, I'm sure you wouldn't be thrilled about it. If I found out that you had a one-night stand with somebody, you never spoke to her again, I wouldn't be thrilled about it. But I would be way more troubled if you were having a true intimate affair of the heart with somebody. Because that's a fear of losing you. You have a one-night stand with somebody, that's a betrayal and it's offensive. But if I don't feel like I possess you, it's not as hurtful or scary as if I fear that you're falling in love with somebody else. Also, I think a big part of it would be knowing that you were lying to me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. That's the bigger problem anyway, really. Yeah. So James Spader, we talked already about he was in Secretary. He and Maggie Gyllenhaal. Great performance by both of them in that. Really good movie. We covered that, I guess it was 2 years ago now because it was 2022. It was 20 years old then. And of course he's doing The Blacklist now on TV. I wonder if he was so acclaimed, including winning that award at the festival over in France, because of how calm and frank he is about sex talk. It's not just that he's talking about sex, he's so calm. And James Spader's not the kind of actor that really goes all that big very often. He almost never does in this movie. It's a very, not bad, of course, I'm not saying that, but just a very mondo, straight line type performance because he's so calm.
Until the camera gets turned on him, and then he
loses it. Yes, right, because she literally picks it up and turns it on him, which I guess in a movie like this makes sense. You would do that. I think it's with Cynthia, though, when he's turned the camera on and she's spoken for a little bit, and then he gets up from the chair where he was sitting with it right beside him, the camera, and lays on the ground in front of her, doing the thing where you lay down and you prop your head up with your hand, which in some ways is more intimate. He's almost further away from her now, and he's not equal with her. He's below her.
They're like kids at a slumber party. they're getting so comfortable. And
So do you think maybe that's what it is that he got such acclaim because of how calm he is about something like sex?
Well, he's playing such an unusual character. I've never met anybody like Graham, who is actually so committed to radical honesty that they almost feel like they rise above it. And he almost is like a supernatural character in some ways, because he just floats in and he's so unusual and he's so unflappable no matter what happens to him until the end. But I buy it. So that is the beauty of his performance, that he pulls off this really unusual character trait, but I never feel like it's put on or phony.
Andie MacDowell was in Groundhog Day 4 years later, and also Shortcuts that same year, which we covered last year, and so is Peter Gallagher. And she had a cameo in The Player, which he's got a major role in. He's Tim Robbins' rival in that film. In addition to that, Peter Gallagher was in American Beauty. He is the king. You get nailed by the king! Fuck me, your majesty! So we covered Peter Gallagher quite a lot over the years. Laura San Giacomo, I think I'm saying that right, was in Pretty Woman. We covered that 4 years ago, like we said, and also Just Shoot Me on television. And Ron Votter, the therapist, was in Silence of the Lambs and Philadelphia, so obviously he knew Jonathan Demme pretty well, and I covered Philadelphia just a few months ago. Soderbergh, in his debut film, we've covered him 4 times now, Out of Sight. He won the Oscar for Traffic. We covered that in 2020 as well as Pretty Woman and some other things. And Contagion we covered because that's when the pandemic started. Little did we know it was going to be really a pandemic in a way still, 4 years later almost. He wrote this quickly. We talked about the predatory tracking shots and also a lot of slow zooms and dollies. So it's a very technical movie for a guy who'd never made one before. And it also hit close to home for Soderbergh because he had rough relationships like apparently Graham does with Elizabeth, I guess, but then couldn't let them die like he can't with Elizabeth, can't move on from them. So it's almost like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me, but don't go, baby. Or he would try to contact them later on. And he's been married, I think, a few times in his life. I guess most Hollywood people have been. Although he's been with Jules Asner now, I think he still is, for a long time. She's a media interviewer, Entertainment Tonight type person, I believe is what she is. His producers were John Hardy and Robert Newmeyer. Hardy worked with Soderbergh a lot over the years, and Newmeyer produced 3 movies I covered with Chris on Scoring at the Movies, which we don't do anymore, of course, the sports movie podcast, Mr. Baseball, Ready to Rumble, and Leatherheads. Movies 185 to 1, we watched the DVD that we own. I think it looked okay considering it's an older movie and it's just a DVD. Walt Lloyd shot it. He also shot Shortcuts, and he worked with Soderbergh again on Kafka. Kafka? It's Kafka, isn't it? Not Kafka.
Kafka.
Yeah, right. Soderbergh cut his own film. He doesn't always do it because Steven Mirioni, is how you say his name, I think, won the Oscar for Traffic. But Soderbergh does do a lot of his own cutting and his own shooting, which he didn't do here, but he started doing, I think, in Traffic. Maybe in the first time he ever did, yeah. But he's cut all of his films since Solaris as Marianne Bernard. And then Peter Andrews is a cinematographer credit. I think they're both tributes to his parents, Mary and Peter, or Marianne and Peter.
And he started his career as an editor. He was an editor before he was a filmmaker. Yeah.
And I think it's pronounced Martinez, because again, the Traffic commentaries where I heard him say this, Soderbergh did many times. Cliff Martinez, not Martinez, I guess, scored Traffic, which I like as a score a lot, Contagion, and did many others with Soderbergh. And this was a good score too. A little weird, ethereal kind of score, especially for a movie as simple as this is. What do you think of the look, the cutting, and the music?
I love it. It's very Indie's film. What you can accomplish with a small budget, although interestingly, he said that this is the only film he ever made where he felt like he had enough money and enough time. But I think that what he did right when he was making his first feature film was that he didn't get too ambitious with expensive things. He has a small cast, he has these small indoor sets. So then you're not focusing on trying to make special effects happen or all these crazy camera shots and lots of actors. So then you just make the time for the rehearsals and you make the time to do multiple takes until you get it the way that you want, because you're not spending time on all these other little things. And he said he wrote the screenplay on a road trip, freehand, on a pad of paper, which I find insane. But then he also admitted that he had been thinking about it for a long time. And it always makes me think of that adage, you have your whole life to write your first novel.
Right.
You have your whole life to make your first film. Every good idea he ever had, he could put into this film somehow. I've loved so many of his movies. I think he's an incredible director, especially for the way that he will try anything. Like, he'll make a movie in any genre. He's very experimental. And sometimes he fails, and sometimes he knocks it out of the park. This isn't even my favorite Soderbergh film, but I'm disappointed that he's never captured a certain kind of magic that he captures in this film with the intimacy and just the beautiful simplicity of really getting to know these characters. I can't think of another film where he really gets this deep and makes you feel like you're there as much as this movie does.
He supposedly wrote a sequel during the early days of the pandemic.
Well, Full Frontal is a sequel, isn't it?
That's what I was going to get to next.
Okay.
But supposedly wrote a sequel during the pandemic about the two sisters, and it was going to be 30 years later. which didn't get produced or hasn't been produced yet. And then Full Frontal with David Duchovny and I think Pitt and Julia Roberts were in at least small roles, was a sequel of sorts, quote unquote, of sorts. Was the
I've never
quote
seen it.
there.
Have you seen it?
I saw it in the theater and I didn't like it very much. I don't remember it
Right,
at all.
right. It got bad reviews, so I just kind of forgot all about it, and I never did check it out.
It was a failed comedy. I didn't laugh very much, so that's why I didn't like it. By the way, just following up some things I said a few minutes ago about his personal life, Jules Asner has been married to her for what's going to be, it is actually 20 years now. They got married in May 2003. He was also married to Betsy Brantley, so he has been married more than once, like I said. And then his parents, Peter Soderbergh and Mary Ann Bernard is her maiden name, so that's where he gets those credits from. And his middle name is Andrews, so Peter Andrews is his dad's name and his middle name. Mary Ann Bernard is literally his mom's full name before she got married to Peter Soderbergh. What happens next? Well, he just said that he wrote a sequel that we didn't see get produced yet. Full Frontal is a sequel of sorts. In a jokey way, like this usually is at this point. We said this already, John will land on his feet because guys like him always do. Cynthia's life is probably always going to be what it is now, bartending and making art in her spare time. Do Graham and Anne stay together? I don't really think so.
Yeah, I don't think.
What's their connection besides, presumably, good sex? If they had sex, I thought they did. Maybe you don't agree. Also, if he was a pathological liar, can he truly reform long term? This is a short period of time here. He's a different person. Is he going to stay being this person that Anne wants to be with long term? And if he doesn't, how much of a leash will Anne give him? She just got out of a marriage to a liar. I just don't think these four people will ever be truly happy anyway. Although Graham might do well to try to become an actual therapist. He's a good listener and knows how to draw people out.
I feel like Graham, Anne, and Cynthia will find happiness because they're introspective people who want to grow. John will always be John. He'll think he's happy, but he'll actually have this rather empty life. And I think of the four characters, Anne is best off at the end of the film, even though she's the one that has to blow up her life the most.
Oh, I would agree with that, yeah.
Yeah. Her life is so miserable at the beginning of the film, even though she doesn't really realize it. You can only go up from here. Plus, she just seems so self-possessed by the end of the film. She comes such a long way, and I'm so happy for her.
Yeah. Okay, then last thoughts on your last movie in the month of Bev, Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
So, men learn to fall in love with the movie that they're attracted to, and women become attracted to the movie that they fall in love with.
Do you agree with that line?
Yeah, I kind of do. It's really oversimplified, but I think it sums up, at least in a small way, a difference between the way men and women approach love. Do you agree with it? It's nicer to women than it is to men, so it might be easier for me to believe it.
I guess so. I don't know. It's one of those stereotypes that seems so situational. Even for me personally, there were times when I was crazy about a woman for shallow reasons, and there were times when I wasn't for shallow reasons. And then obviously only one thing ever worked out, because only one thing ever really truly does, if you think about it. Even if you get married for 40 years and divorce them, then that didn't work out forever and ever. So I've been the bad guy in relationships. I've been bad guyed by women. So I don't know. I think it's really situational. There are so many shades of people, and I'm learning that more as I get older. Sometimes there are people that you don't like in life that you know, or they're famous people that you watch, and they disappoint you or they surprise you. And then maybe later on, they do the opposite thing all over again. You might think, oh, I didn't really like that person all that much. Keanu Reeves is such a great guy, and he probably always will be. But he's been put on a pedestal by a lot of people that really didn't know that, because he's never been the greatest actor. He's a good-looking man. He's been in some great films. But it's hard not to like him as a person because he seems like such a good human being. But he's going to disappoint us in some way.
That's a lot of words when all you had to say was that I was beautiful and wonderful.
Oh, right.
Instead of all of that.
Well, I wasn't thinking about it. I was thinking about other people, not you.
You really blew it.
Well, we were drawn right away.
You may have been attracted to me, that's fine, but we had a great personality match from the jump.
And my long-winded point comes down to this. People are complex. All right, your last thoughts on Sex, Lies.
Those were my
Okay.
last thoughts.
My last thoughts, then. I'm a fan of this one. I was probably even more of a fan before so many other movies with this basic feel have come and gone in the years since. And that waters down the impact a little bit when it's not really the only one or one of the few. It's one of many that have done this basic idea.
Responsible for a lot of films like this getting made.
The actors are really good, especially the women. It's a fascinating portrait of four, I'll say it again, liars, because I think they all are in one way or another. A guy saying he's a liar. The other guy absolutely is. The sister was for a while anyway. And then Anne's lying to herself. As for the filmmaking, Soderbergh found his stride right at the shoot. This is one of the most accomplished debut films you'll ever see. Yes, Citizen Kane is more famous for that, and being John Malkovich for Spike Jonze, for example. But this is such a good screenplay. It's well directed. It's pretty dynamic, like we've been saying already. It doesn't feel claustrophobic either, even though we're mostly in three houses and seeing mostly these four people. And that was how we saw Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And that's it for the 9th annual month of Bev. You chose Repo Man, Force Majeure, The Talented Mr. Ripley, and Sex, Lies, and Videotape. I didn't love Repo Man. I liked the other three quite a lot. Your favorite movie was?
Force Majeure.
Okay. I think my favorite might have been Talented Mr. Ripley. I'm surprised to say that, but I really like that more than I ever had before.
I love all 4 movies, but I would say Repo Man is also the weakest of those 4, although I still enjoy it and respect its
and Force Majeure, I liked
sensibility.
it fine the first time. I liked it a lot more this time than we saw it a few weeks ago, and this was good to see all over again. No criticisms except something I can't control, which is it's 35 years old and other films have done some of the same things. In 7 days, it will be February, and we'll begin another theme month. 2 years ago, we called February the month of Strange Love, and it was Crazy Stupid Love month last year, although we didn't actually review Dr. Strangelove or Crazy Stupid Love. That's just what we called them. So this year's February theme will be Love in a Word. They'll be all one-word titles about romance or passion. Most of them are pretty funny, and this first one is a pretty renowned comedy. Also a box office sensation and an Oscar winner. It's Dudley Moore and Liza Minnelli in Arthur. The coming attraction's opinion question for Arthur. Didn't really have a trivia question. We've seen the movie. I still don't have a trivia question, but this might stimulate a good discussion. Arthur will inherit $750 million, I almost said billion, $750 million. By the way, adjusted for inflation, that apparently is over $2 billion now is what he would inherit. Anyway, so $750 million. If he just marries the woman his family has picked out for him. If you had $750 million coming to you, name 3 things you would do with that much money.
So for our answers to that question, check out next week's podcast about Arthur. You already know how to find us, but let me remind you to favorite or subscribe wherever you listen, which is also where you can find our archive of hundreds of episodes that are available for free. Please leave us a rating and a review. That's a great way to support the podcast. We're both on Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis Ellis and Ryan is at MovieFiend51. You can also find me on Threads at Bev Ellis Ellis. Or you can reach us by email, haveyouvseenseenpodcast@gmail.com. And you can find our podcast on YouTube. Our channel is at HYES Ellis. And to enjoy freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada or the US, please go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and enjoy a 20% discount.
You can go now.
And cut.